What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Guitar Gear Trader channel. I am Steve, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee, as always. And this is episode 3 in the Guitar Deal Tactics series, where I give you tips and tricks on how to get the best deal for the least amount of money, or even no money, just by trading some stuff. So this tactic is not necessarily going to help you trade or get equipment that's new to you. It's actually a tip or tactic to help you get equipment back that you traded away or sold and you miss and you want back in your life. So how did this all come about? I have a story for you about a guitar that I did this with, but I want to give you kind of like a background about how this all came about. I love guitar books. I like reading about how people collect and keep collections and document collections, tell you about the mods that they made on guitars, how they acquired them, any special things about the guitars and how they use them in recordings and things like that. And the book that really kicked all that off for me was this book called Beatles Gear by Andy Babiuk, or Babiuk, however you pronounce his name. This was the first book that I ever got that really documented gear. And obviously it's all about the gear that the Beatles used. And it goes through their amps, their guitars, basses, drum sets. It tells you kind of the songs that these guitars were used on, where the Beatles got these guitars from, what years they got them in. It's very detailed pictures of the guitars. And if it's not the actual guitar that the Beatles used, it's a modern reproduction of the guitar that the Beatles used. And I remember being an 18, 19-year-old kid, just looking at that book every day, saying, how can I get my hands on a lot of these style guitars so that I can sound like my heroes? And from there, it went on and continued, and I sought out more books. So this is a book I think everyone should have, which is the Norman's Rare Guitars. This book goes through not just one style guitar or one band that used certain guitars. It gives you the histories of Fenders, Gibsons. I'm not sure how much it delves into other brands like Gretsch or Rickenbacker, but it definitely goes in. You definitely have some of it, but the majority of this book is going to deal with vintage Gibsons, vintage Fenders, because those two names are the biggest names in guitar history. But it's a great book to look at. Another book that I'm pretty fond of is this book this is James Hetfield's guitar collection. It's called The Guitars of James Hetfield, and I got this on Amazon. It's a pretty expensive book, and it goes through all of James's guitars and tells you the history of the guitars, where they got them, what songs they used them on, things like that. Not my favorite book in my collection, but very, very cool book from a band that I really, really love. And then kind of the reason I'm making this video is because of this book. And this book is called Mars Guitars. And Mars Guitars is the collection of the guitar player Johnny Marr, who was in the Smiths and a whole bunch of other bands. And the only reason I know about Johnny Marr is because of my love for Oasis. Noel Gallagher is very close friends with Johnny Marr. Johnny Marr is like a mentor to Noel. And I never really listened to Johnny Marr's music, to be honest. I still don't really know much of the Smiths and Johnny Marr's music. But I've seen interviews with the guy, and the guy loves guitars. And I love hearing him talk about his guitars. So this book came out. It's a nice hardcover book. I got this for Christmas, I want to say a year or two ago. Had to be 2 years. And it just goes through all of Johnny's guitars. And it's a beautifully done book. The photography is amazing in it. And he gives you stories on the guitars. Look at these photos. These photos are unbelievable. And there was a story in here about a guitar that Johnny sold, and like 15 years later, he got the guitar back. He was able to get the guitar back. And I said to myself, how is it possible to sell a guitar and 15 years later find that guitar hanging in a shop somewhere? How do you know it's yours? How can you verify that it was yours and stuff like that? And then that got me thinking. There was a guitar, and to be honest, spoiler alert, it's this guitar. Okay, this is my 2005 Gibson Firebird Studio. This is a very no-frills Gibson Firebird. Okay, it doesn't have any fancy binding. It doesn't have any fancy inlays. It doesn't even have the right pickups for a Firebird, right? This has 2 humbucking pickups that came stock with the guitar. It's heavy. It's a set neck. Okay, so it's not a neck through like the fancy Firebirds. And I got this guitar for my college graduation from my parents. Okay, so I graduated in 2004, and the May of 2005, I guess. And this guitar was bought for me by my parents, and that was my main gigging guitar in my cover band at the time, and I loved that guitar. And then COVID hit, and I got bored, as everyone did during COVID, and I was on Reverb a lot, and things were really reasonably priced still at the time, right when COVID was starting. And I found an orange amp. It was a combo TH30 that I really, really wanted, because I used to have a TH30 head and cabinet, and I got rid of that when the band broke up, and I really wanted another one. And this pawn shop in Philadelphia had a combo, and they wanted like $800 for it. So I called them up. They were open. I was living in New York City at the time, so Philadelphia is only about an hour and a half drive away. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this studio, Firebird Studio, that my parents bought me, and I'm going to go see if they'll, give me a trade for the orange combo amp. Now, at the time, these Firebirds, you could probably get these for $800-900 at the time. Now they're a lot more money. I don't know if they're worth it, to be really honest, but at the time, brand new, I think this was $1,299, maybe $1,100 brand new at the time, and you can get them pretty reasonably $750, $800, $850, $900 range at the time. So I got it, put it in my car. I drove down to Philly in the middle of COVID, and I traded that guitar for the orange TH30 combo amp, as well as a Korean-made or Chinese-made Epiphone Casino, because I'm a big Beatles fan. And then I had that TH30 for a long time. I moved towards the couple months after to Tennessee, and a couple years go by, and as I'm living in Tennessee, I moved down here with 2 guitars. Actually, yeah, 2 guitars. I moved down here with an acoustic and a Rickenbacker that my wife got me, that black one right there. Okay, for our wedding gift. And I was sitting down one day, and I was like, I read this book by Johnny Marr, and in there he talks about this one guitar that, like I said before, he sold, and 10-15 years later got his hands on it back again. And I was like, I wonder where that Firebird is. I wonder how that Firebird's doing. So I went online and I typed in 2005 Firebird Studio, and a whole bunch of listings come up, probably 40, 50 listings come up, different colors and, different, styles of this guitar. And, you know how they're all like little thumbnails? Well, this thumbnail of this guitar caught my eye for some reason. And if anybody lives in the Northeast, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut area, this living room, or whatever room this guitar is in at the moment, looks like a very old Northeast kind of living room, or, dining room, whatever. Has those really old wooden floors, those thick kind of moldings that look like they've been painted over 15 times. And for some reason, I don't know why, I click on this link because the picture to me looks like it's from the Northeast. And I'm looking at the guitar, And I'm saying to myself, there's no way I'm ever going to know if this is my guitar that I sold to that pawn shop. I was like, how am I ever going to be able to find that guitar like Johnny Marr found his guitar in the book that I read? So I look at where the guitar is listed. And if you see here, it's listed in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I'm like, no way. What are the chances, right? So now I don't have any documentation of this guitar. I don't have its serial numbers. I don't have anything. However, there was one very, very unique thing about this guitar that is only for this guitar. When it was bought from me, it was used. The middle lock on the case with the number combination was busted. So there was no middle latch. And the end, one of the latches on the ends was also busted. So there was only one functional latch on this entire case. It says, all right, I'm going to go to the local hardware store. It's a mom and pop shop in Staten Island, New York, called, what was the name of it? It was an Ace Hardware, but it was owned by somebody. Friedman's. Okay, it was Friedman's Hardware. And I bought, the only thing they had at the time in the store were these giant trunk latches. Very, very large, oversized latches for like trunks. And if you don't know what a trunk is, if you're too young to know what a trunk is, basically back in the day when people, their luggage wasn't on wheels and had handles, they were these big boxes like what you would find at like a pirate treasure inn, and had these big, lids that opened up and they locked with these big latches. Well, I came home as a 19, 20-year-old, whatever I was, 20, 21 years old, and I installed by myself with a couple of screws and a drill these giant oversized latches, 2 of them, onto the case. So I'm looking through the pictures, and I'm like, again, I don't know if this is mine. They probably made 1 million of these guitars. That's the same case that I had. It was a black interior case that had one of those like velvet sheets that went over the guitar. Right? I took very good care of my guitar, so I didn't like put nicks or dings or scratches into them. But then he shows this picture right here. And if we zoom in on the picture, we see all the way to the right, we have our normal Gibson lock. But here and here, we have 2 third-party installed Friedman's trunk latches that I installed onto that case. And I almost went through the ceiling. Right? I'm sitting here in Tennessee, scrolling through Reverb, and on a whim, I said, I wonder what these guitars go for now, because I would love to have it back. That's how it kind of came up. I would love to have the guitar back, or a similar guitar to it back, because I really enjoyed using it when I was playing in my band. And here's proof. Here's a picture of me playing in my band with it. Okay, that was me way back in the day. A lot less gray hairs, 0 gray hairs. But email the guy, because this is the actual listing, right? I email the guy, and I ask him, did you happen to buy this from a pawn shop in Philly? And he writes back, yeah, I did. The guy told me that a teacher came in and traded it in for an orange amp and an Epiphone. And that confirmed what I was thinking, that is my exact guitar. So I told him, I was like, listen, this was my guitar. My parents bought it for me for a graduation gift. And, I would really love to have it back. Would you take $1,800 for it? Because he had it listed. You can see here, he had it listed for $22. I offered him $1,800 and he took the $1,800. Now that's $1,000 more than what my parents bought it for back in the day. But he took it. He was like, I'm glad to be part of the story, and I'm glad to give you your guitar back. And he shipped it, and I had it in a couple of days. I had to do a little bit of fixing on it because the input jack was becoming a little disconnected, but I got my guitar back. That led me on this journey of, you need to start documenting your guitars. And that's what I've done. So this is my book called The Collection. I call it The Collection. And I have a couple of volumes, and I'll tell you why. But in this book, I document every guitar that I get into my hands. I write the serial numbers down. I take pictures, detailed pictures of things that are unique. And I keep track of every guitar that passes through my house, no matter if I sell it or keep it or whatever. Now, just to let everybody know, this is not a sponsored video. I'm just showing you what I use. I happen to use this app that I found called Mimeo. I don't have any affiliation with Mimeo. They're, like I said, they are not paying me to do this. I just want to show you what I use. So it's an app that I use on my MacBook, and basically it's a book creator. You can create little picture books with it. So I have a couple of different volumes because you're limited to a certain amount of pages. So when you run out of pages, I just make a new collection and keep going from there. So, but this is my book, and all these pictures that I use are pictures that I take of my gear. It comes with, you can pick different templates and different cover styles and all that stuff. I'm not going to get too deep into it because they're not paying me to promote them. But page by page, I wrote a little story here about, a little prologue to the book, why I wrote the book and why I got into guitars. And, I set it up by guitar company. So these are the Gretches that I have. And you can see I take pictures in my loft. In my loft, I have a wall that has all these hatch prints from the Ryman Auditorium concerts that I go to. I go to the Ryman all the time. And any time I go there, I get a hatch print. Anytime I go to a concert and they have a poster, I buy the poster. But what I do is I write down the name, the year of the guitar, the serial number of the guitar, and if there is anything special about the acquisition of that guitar. What I've been doing is, if I'm trading stuff, I'll say what I traded for to get that guitar, so that I figure that out. And you can make this as fancy or as simple as you want. You can put as many pictures as you want. You can put as much text as you want. And like I said, I just put the year, the serial number, and if there's anything special about that guitar that I want to not forget. Okay. Sometimes for old vintage stuff, I'll take it apart and take pictures of the pot codes. I'll make sure to put the cases in there if they're the original cases. Okay. And I just started doing this over the years. And like I said, a lot of these guitars that are in this book, I don't have anymore. I don't have this White Falcon. I don't have this White Falcon. There's a couple of White Falcons in here. I don't have it anymore. I don't have this orange 6120. I don't have this Country Club anymore. But I have documentation that I've owned them. I have serial numbers. I have pictures of the serial numbers, and anything other pertinent information about the guitar. Just in the case that I ever come across these again and want them back. Right? Out of these guitars, I don't have any of these 4 guitars. All 4 of these guitars are out of my possession at this point, but I have information on all of them. Okay, and then I go on to acoustics. I take pictures of the inside serial numbers on the Martins. Okay, again, I write down, like, this was a custom shop model, so there's not a lot of these made. So I write that in the description. If I sold or traded any of these to get something else, I'll put that in there as well. And I now have, I think, 3 volumes now of these books. I'm really glad that I've done that, and I started putting amps into them now because I'm getting, amps here and there and trading amps from time to time nowadays. So I'm trying to put all that in there now. But it's a valuable tool that you can use if you ever sell a guitar that you're like, man, I wish I had that guitar back. Now, a lot of you might be asking, well, was it worth it, right? And I got to say, in my head, this sounded a certain way, and when I got it back, it didn't sound the way I remembered it. That doesn't mean it's not good. It doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy it. But this guitar is much darker than I remember it. It is a solid piece of mahogany. It weighs a ton, but it is very dark guitar. It has tons of bass, and it has I struggle to get high end or even mids out of this guitar without really messing around with my amp, where opposed to my my R9 Les Paul, that thing, you plug it in, no matter what setting you have on your amp, it sounds incredible. But I am extremely glad I have this back in my possession. I was impulsive and I was stupid during COVID, and I wanted to just get out of the house because I was stir crazy. And I gave up a guitar that meant a lot to me, that was given to me by people that I love, and, gave it away for what? An amp. That I love the amp. I don't have the amp anymore. I actually traded the amp a couple weeks ago. But it wasn't worth the trade, right? It wasn't, the trade wasn't worth it. I don't even have that Epiphone anymore. I sold the Epiphone too. And that Epiphone smelled like cigarette ashtray. But I'm glad I got it back. I'm glad the guy worked with me to get it back in my hands. I'm not going to get rid of it again. I actually might change the pickups. If you've been following the channel, I have a Butch Walker guitar, like not a signature model, like a guitar owned by Butch Walker, the famous producer, that he put a pair of very vintage Seymour Duncan pickups in. It's an Explorer, and I don't dig Explorers. I feel like I'm too old to be on stage with an Explorer. But a Firebird's, I'm not too old for a Firebird. They're not as in your face and pointy as an Explorer. So I might take those pickups out and throw them in here and see if that brightens it up, because those pickups are really hot. They're super distortion Seymour Duncans, and maybe that'll transform this guitar back into what I kind of remembered it being. But that's my tactic for you. Document everything that comes into your possession. I haven't started doing this for pedals yet. I might start doing it for pedals. It doesn't take long to take pictures of things, and as long as you have the pictures, you can add them to your, and it doesn't have to be a book either. Right? It doesn't have to be something like this. When I end up getting these printed, I always get them printed whenever I run out of pages in the program. This cost me like $200 every time I print one out. So I have 4 of these printed out. So I've spent $800 on these books. But it's a fun hobby, right? I set them up in my loft. I take pictures. My kids and my wife think I'm crazy. But when one day I'm not going to be here anymore, and all this stuff is going to be left to my poor children, who are probably not going to want it, and they're going to have to get rid of it. But they'll know what it's worth, right? I started putting what I paid for these things in here. It's real important that you put the names of the models, so that like when my kids inherit this stuff, they know that that's not just a Rickenbacker. They know that that's a Rickenbacker 360 from 1984, or that's a 67 ES 330. They need to know the years of these things, so that they don't get duped by somebody when they go to try and sell this stuff, after I'm gone and they have to deal with it all. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you find this helpful, let me know. If you've done something like this, let me know. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment. Follow me on Instagram at Guitar Gear Trader. And I will see you next time. Peace out, everybody.